Imagine a man standing at the edge of his life, not at the beginning, not at the end, but somewhere in the middle, lost in the everyday. He feels stuck, overwhelmed by bad habits, unfulfilled dreams, and goals he's never quite reached. Every failure chips away at his hope. He wonders, is change even possible for someone like me? This is Morgan's story, a journey of tiny steps, heartbreaking failures, and life-changing transformations. Through one small action at a time, Morgan learns that the secret to success lies in the smallest of things. Chapter 1. The Breaking Point. Morgan sat on his couch, surrounded by the mess of his apartment, his thoughts heavier than ever. It felt like his life had slowly unraveled. He wasn't where he thought he'd be by now. His job was mediocre at best, his relationships were strained, and his health was declining. It was a slow, painful spiral, and each attempt to fix things felt like a failure. One night, after another long day of numbing himself with TV and junk food, Morgan hit rock bottom. He hadn't planned for it, but there he was, sitting in the darkness, tears streaming down his face. He felt powerless. He was lost in his own bad habits, actions so small, yet they had the power to pull him down, day by day. But amidst the despair, a tiny spark ignited. He came across a concept: atomic habits. The idea was simple but profound. Small habits, when repeated, could create massive change. That night, he made a decision. He would try one last time, but this time, he would start small, tiny, even 5 minutes a day. That was it, nothing more. Chapter 2. The Power of Small Changes. The next day, Morgan put on his sneakers. He had committed to walking for 5 minutes. It felt ridiculous. What could 5 minutes possibly do for him? But he did it anyway. The next day, he did it again. And the next day after that, at first it felt like nothing was happening. But then, something shifted. 5 minutes turned into 10. His body started to feel a little better. Morgan wasn't just walking now. He was proving something to himself. Every tiny step built confidence, and every day, he felt a little less stuck. The more he embraced small habits, the more he realized that life was built on these tiny, almost invisible actions. They weren't glamorous. They didn't offer instant rewards, but they were powerful in their consistency. Little by little, Morgan was building momentum. Chapter 3. The Hidden Progress. Weeks passed, and Morgan started to form new habits in other parts of his life. He applied the same small steps philosophy to his writing. Every morning before work, he wrote for just 10 minutes. The words came slowly, but they came, however. The excitement of starting something new quickly faded. The results weren't visible. His body hadn't changed much from the walks, and his writing still felt amateur. He started to doubt himself again. Morgan felt stuck, again. But this time, he remembered the metaphor of the ice cube. Habits, like melting ice, don't show immediate results. You can raise the temperature from 26 to 31 degrees, and the ice will still stay frozen. But at 32 degrees, everything changes. He hadn't reached his 32 degrees yet, but he knew it was coming. Progress was happening below the surface, even if he couldn't see it yet. Chapter 4. Falling Apart Again. Then came the real tragedy. Just as Morgan felt like things were improving, his world collapsed. The company where he worked announced layoffs. Despite his efforts to improve, he was let go. The news hit Morgan like a punch to the gut. All his effort, all the changes, none of it seemed to matter. He had been trying so hard to build new habits, to be better, but life had thrown him back into chaos. The darkness crept in again. For weeks, he abandoned everything. The walk stopped, the writing stopped. He fell back into his old habits, binge-watching TV, overeating, sleeping too much. The progress he had made felt like a distant memory. Failure overwhelmed him. Chapter 5. The Climb Back. One night, as Morgan stared blankly at the TV, he realized something. The habits he had built before had given him more control over his life. They hadn't solved everything, but they had given him a path forward. So he picked up the pieces. He decided to start small again, just like he had before. 5 minutes of walking, 10 minutes of writing, that's all. And slowly, step by step, Morgan began to climb out of the hole. This time, he knew the power of persistence. He knew that even if he couldn't see it, change was happening beneath the surface. He wasn't just building habits anymore, he was rebuilding himself. Chapter 6. The 4 Laws of Habits. With each passing day, Morgan applied the principles he had learned about habits: cue, craving, response, reward. He adjusted his environment, setting his walking shoes by the door and his notebook on his desk. But this time, he also focused on breaking bad habits. He made them invisible. No more junk food in the house, no more distractions near his workspace. He made them unattractive by reminding himself of the long-term damage they were doing. He made them difficult by adding barriers. His phone stayed in another room and the TV remote was hidden away. Slowly, the bad habits faded and the good ones stuck. Morgan wasn't perfect, but he was better. He felt in control. Chapter 7. The Identity Shift. One day, Morgan realized something profound. He wasn't just changing his habits, he was changing who he was. Before, he had always seen himself as someone who wanted to be better, but never quite made it. Now, he saw himself as someone who was better. He wasn't trying to be fit. He was a fit person who walked every day. He wasn't trying to write a book. He was a writer. This shift in identity made everything easier. Habits weren't chores anymore. They were part of who he was. Chapter 8. The Breakthrough. Months later, Morgan woke up one morning and realized that his life had changed. Not overnight, not in some dramatic fashion, but through the slow, steady accumulation of tiny habits. His body was stronger, his mind was clearer, his writing was better, and he had a new job, one that suited him more than the last. Everything had shifted. But more than anything, Morgan had learned the most important lesson. Success isn't about grand gestures or overnight changes. It's about showing up every day, even when you don't want to. It's about trusting that every tiny step forward is bringing you closer to the life you want. Morgan's journey wasn't one of perfection. It was a story of failure, pain, persistence, and eventual triumph. In the end, it wasn't just about habits. It was about becoming the person he always knew he could be. At the end. Through Atomic Habits, Morgan's story is one of deep struggle, emotional lows, and small but powerful victories. His failures didn't break him. They became the foundation for his ultimate success. And that's the power of tiny habits. They don't just change your behavior, they change who you are.